and then hit recording.
But I read today how your staff.
Your taxes, your organs and everything. and-
But there is, and as much as I hate like a subdivision, there's a really cool brand new development called
Promenade tomorrow.
Compass. It's got a circle park and then it's, another row and another row. And it's so
Madam Chair, we are recording. I believe.
like,
Are we ready? I hereby call to order the Town of Frisco, June 17th, Planning Commission meeting. Cheryl, will you please take roll?
Commissioner Scupion,
Here.
Commissioner Gleason,
Here.
Commissioner Lesmith,
Here.
Commissioner Franken,
Here.
Commissioner Tain,
Here.
Commissioner Withrow,
Here.
Commissioner Stabile.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl distributed the June 3rd, 20.
I move them.
All in favor? At this time, we will open up the floor to public comment. If you wish to make a public comment on any items that are not on tonight's agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. Either step to the podium or raise your hand online to signify that you have a public comment at this time. I'm seeing none, so we will close the public comment portion of this meeting and move on to agenda items. First off, on the agenda is a review of the major site plan application for the proposed Centura Studios mixed-use project located at 18 School Road, Lot 1, St. Anthony Medical Campus, applicant Traditional Neighborhood Developers LLC, representing Centura Health. Bill, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. So as mentioned, we are talking about this Centura Studios project. You saw this back in March. It's been in your packet a few times, but now we're talking about it on a final review. So the project is part of a larger phased redevelopment of Centura's property out there on School Road. The medical office building was the first phase. This housing project is a second, and there's a to be determined third phase. We don't have any information on timing or what that'll be, but that's how this kind of fits into the puzzle there. So it's one large lot for zoning purposes and ownership purposes. And so the zoning parameters are reviewed on that lot as a whole. So outlined in your staff report, we did mention there are proposed 37 new units in 3 buildings. The applicant has indicated that they intend to use these housing units as employee housing for Centura Health employees for their own workforce and some of their community partners. I would note that this is not a zoning obligation. They are not using density bonus or any other parameters of our code, so they are under no obligation by the town code to deed restrict these properties or otherwise encumber their property in any way. Just to hit a few highlights in your staff report for you, I know you've all read this, but we did evaluate the community plan and believe the project is in conformance with the inclusive community and thriving economy strategic goals in that. This project is zoned mixed use district as we talked in the past. It complies with lot area, lot frontage, open space, lot coverage, setbacks, building height, and density. In terms of land uses within the mixed use district, there is a requirement that projects have a no less than 20% either commercial or residential percentage to be a permitted use. This project does fall within that permitted use category. If a future phase of the project would push either commercial or residential beyond 80%, that would be a new conditional application that would come before the Planning Commission for review at that time. But as proposed, this is a permitted use on the property. As identified in your staff report, they are proposing to be solar ready on the project. And we also outlined that the development standards in 180-6 have all been met, including the drainage plan, as well as the traffic studies that were reviewed by our Public Works Department and the town engineer. The traffic study did identify that the proposed residential would generate fewer trips than the formal commercial use, and therefore not require any additional roadway improvements or additional permitting processes through CDOT. They've also address the refuse management requirements in terms of also making those wildlife proof and getting sign off from their hauler, submitting a letter of verification for that. The project also complies with the non-residential development standards. Even though this phase is residential, the property as a whole is mixed use and the development as a whole is mixed use. So therefore, they must follow the non-residential development standards. So the project does comply with those various standards for facades, building articulation, roof design, neighborhood character, materials, colors. Is one large lot, so the parking calculated on the whole does have a surplus of 16 spaces for our code purposes. So they do meet our parking requirement. They also meet the visitor parking requirement, and they also exceed the accessible parking requirement. The town code now includes a provision where applicants can request a parking reduction for electrical vehicle charging stations. They are providing the number required by the building code and are not requesting any type of deviation or reduction in their parking requirement using that provision. They also comply with the snow standards of the town code. We also analyzed the landscaping for the project. This is a mixed use large project, which is a different category than just a standard mixed use project and has a lesser landscaping requirement. The plan was designed to comply with the non-large mixed project, so therefore exceeds the minimum number of trees and shrubs by a pretty substantial amount, as noted in your staff report, and complies with our landscaping standards. The project also complies with our outdoor lighting standards in terms of fixtures, offsite spillage, those types of things. The property does abut Dillon Reservoir, of course, within 200 yards of the shoreline. So there is a special provision in the code that lights, in addition to being fully shielded, must also be shielded from the shoreline. So that's something we will take a look at the final building inspection to ensure compliance with that provision of the code. We've also included in your packet some review comments from Summit Fire and EMS, Public Works Engineering, Summit County GIS, Frisco Sanitation District, and Excel Energy. And the applicant has been diligently meeting all those requirements. So staff is recommending approval of this project based upon the findings that are listed starting on page 25 of your staff report. And we are recommending an action on page 26. We have kind of in there the standard conditions you see on most applications where they need to satisfy the referral comments from the review agencies. We did have one additional one that we are expecting the applicant to provide us written verification from Denver Water that Denver Water has signed off on their proposed connection between the bike path and their properties, since that is on Denver Water property. So that is one special condition listed in your staff report. So we are recommending approval with the recommended motion on the bottom of page 26. I'm available for any questions. I believe the applicant is online and Ronnie has a presentation for you as well.
Thank you. Donna, Ira, any questions for staff?
I have a question. If I read this correctly, there's on-street parking credits. Does that mean there's short-term parking allowed on school road?
So the on-street parking credits would not apply to this property. Where that typically applies is Main Street, and you can get a reduction based upon adjacent public parking. So they are not requesting any type of parking reduction based on that provision, and I don't believe it applies to this property.
So just hypothetically, in the event of an event or something, is short-term parking allowed on school lane, school road?
That would have to be coordinated through our police department. If it were to be some type of event.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Donna?
One question. So it would appear to me that based on the previous plan, the hardscape is occupying more space than it previously did, mostly towards that, we'll call it the phase 3 components. And that's delineated parking spots that are kind of per code in excess of 1. What happens when later somebody says, okay, cool, we're going to develop the phase 3 part, and that requires X parking spots and the parking count overlaps with this one? I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with that, but I'm just kind of curious how we aggregate the parking over the total package versus now.
Yes, so from staff's perspective, we review this project based on the whole. So we took into account the medical office building and the Centura Studios to ensure that the total number of parking spaces on the site complies with code, which it does and has surplus from the town code perspective. The medical office building and this Intura Studios developers have come up with their own private agreement about parking and who utilizes what and where. So that's a civil matter between the two of them. In terms of future redevelopment of that northwest corner, the property owner and a future applicant can come in and propose whatever project they're proposing and utilize those extra 16 spaces as part of their project, or they may theory tear those out and construct something different. They would also have the opportunity to take advantage of some of the parking reduction provisions of our code. So they could apply for a multi-use credit, or maybe they install extra EV charging stations in the future to get a reduction. So it'd be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, depending on specifically what the future proposal.
Thank you.
They will have to deed restrict the extra excess units, correct? Because there's still excess units in this.
There are not.
There are not, did they reduce?
So they're allowed development density, I believe, is 54 units. And so there's 37. So they're well under their allowed maximum density.
I think you may be thinking of another project we had recently.
Probably.
Yeah, so they're, so they are not proposing to take it. The density bonus provision is available for this property, but they are not taking advantage of that incentive because they're so far under the allowed density.
So nothing prevents. I mean, if they wanted to sell these units into the future, they would have to condo this. Well, they'd have to split the property, wouldn't they?
They would have the option of renting these or selling these as if any other residential project in town in compliance with.
Without doing anything to the property. I mean, it wouldn't affect the multi-use nature of this property.
Correct, yeah. So hypothetically, if they wanted to sell individual units, they would need to go through a final plat process.
Okay, they would have to replat.
Yeah, so they would have to do those to condominiumize them and create an association and some other legal documents that go with that, but that's an administrative process. If they chose to pursue that.
So as much as we might love this project, they have no guarantee that this will stay workforce housing.
Correct. And I would say that you're basing your decision tonight on the fact that the project applies to the code
Understand that?
versus
I always
a more
understand.
altruistic
Yes.
desire of this being a
Yeah.
purpose for.
I know, but I like to know all the facts as I'm walking into it. And then to follow up, on his question. They did, parcel 3 is now smaller, correct?
There is no technical.
Well, I know,
parcels,
but
I
what
would
was,
say-
what was parcel 3 is now
Correct.
smaller.
Yeah, I would say that the phase 3 development area is smaller because of the additional parking. But as we discussed, they have opportunities to redesign that in the future should they choose to.
I'm done.
Thank you. I have no questions for staff, so at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Ronnie, for your presentation.
Guess we have to lean in more.
I already took it off mute.
Bill, I'm not sure if you've called upon us to present. It is very difficult to hear people speaking.
Yes.
Here, you give the floor over to you, Ronnie.
You handed it over to me.
For everybody.
Um, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. Right. Can everyone see my share screen?
Yes.
Great. It's good to see everyone again. Ronnie Pelucio. I'm an architect and planner, and my company's name is Polona Architects and Urbanists. I'm here with the leadership from Centura Health, Lee Boyles, the CEO, Cindy Farnsworth, the HR director, and Emily Ebert, the finance director. You've heard from all of us before, and they're here to answer any questions that might come up. I want to start by thanking you for your consideration of our proposal for the Centura Health site. And I want to compliment Bill Gibson, as he did a great job covering all the critical points of this proposal. And in particular, over the last few weeks, he's helped guide us through the submittal process. And I apologize that we have submitted and withdrawn a couple of times. I'll explain a little more about that, but I wanted to thank Bill in particular. So thanks, Bill. The last time we were here, council had just met with the Insight Collective, and since then, the town's commitment to a diversity of housing options that serve your workforce has elevated to a state of emergency. And we're happy to say that we believe that this project is another step forward with helping to solve Frisco's housing challenges. And in an effort to keep this presentation succinct, I want to talk about two things tonight. How the plan has changed since you've last reviewed it, and what we heard were your specific comments and how we responded to them. So as noted in staff report, the most significant changes pertain to parking and the building's architectural character. I'm just going to flip a slide here. As you saw, there's a letter of support that was provided by our neighbors and owners of the Panorama building. And that's really what we've been working on in the majority of the time since our last presentation to you. The change to the parking was a direct response to their desire to maintain the use of all the parking stalls that are depicted east of the red line work on these images. And all the images we'll be showing are comparative. We thought it would be helpful for you to see the previous submittal and then the current submittal. Our previous proposal on the left included a shared parking agreement for visitor parking and the exclusive use of 13 stalls east of that line. The current proposal locates all parking associated with these 37 residential units and their guest parking on the west side of the line. So there's no longer a request for shared parking, and the owners of the Panorama building can maintain full use of all the stalls in front of their building. The second significant change relates to the architectural character. And these changes were made to address your comments and how the building appears from all sides, as well as Panorama's desire for our buildings to more closely relate to their existing building and material. In an effort to improve the disposition of each building on all sides, greater articulation has been added to the forms, and you can see that there are more frequent jogs in the building faces, and the roof form steps down to better reduce the overall massing. The proposal updates the color scheme to eliminate the brighter white colors of our previous application and to reflect the color scheme found in the Panorama building. So you can see in the comparative image here. In key locations, stone that is similar to the stone on the Panorama building has also been added to our proposal. And we believe that these changes really help improve the overall character of the campus of buildings, as well as the specific views from Summit Boulevard at the Gateway site. We've included some images in this proposal that really show what it would look like at ground level or vehicle level on Summit Boulevard. And other images in your package describe other perspectives. The image at the bottom here, while you didn't necessarily see it in this full form last time, was that view from the road. You could see greater articulation's been added. The image at the top reflects that. But at the same time, at the high level, in terms of the planning level, we think the objectives of creating an attractive and usable outdoor space at the center of the plan still remain, while giving attention to each of the sides of the building. So again, I want to thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Robert, we'll start with you. Any questions for the applicant?
Ronnie, what did you do? And I didn't.
Lean in a
Oh.
little bit more.
Ronnie, what did you do in regards to any improvements in accessibility that we had talked about?
Well, you know, the parking has changed somewhat. We've added an additional ADA stall to the parking plan. This might be challenging to see, but there's a pair of ADA parking stalls with all of the accessibility ramping requirements at the northeast corner of the 11 unit building. So we've improved this by adding more parking that meets those qualities. And it still remains that there is one type A unit on the ground floor and all other ground floor units are type B.
Is there any possibility if in the future, if somebody came by that needed a type A, that any of these could be retrofitted to type A, or are we totally limited to one type A?
I think there could be a retrofit. It's kind of a question of how much of the plan could change. You know, the major difference between the type A and type B has to do with the footprint area of the bathroom space.
Correct.
The kitchens, I think, could easily convert. But I think it would require shifting a wall in order to do that. I don't think it's not possible. So I'm not sure exactly whether or not the owners would want to do that at some point, but I think if there was a need for it, that it's possible to modify that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hey, Ronnie, would you mind please going back to the last perspective slide that showed the courtyard?
Sure.
There you go. Real minor question, but on the right, I see what looks like two congruent materials stacked over one another. Is that indeed the intent?
Oh, yeah, so there's a break line here. That's just a aspect of the model. Yes, that is horizontal siding on the face of that building.
But bottom to top.
That's
It's
correct.
not necessarily a break.
That's correct.
Thanks for clarifying.
Hi, Ronnie. Can you walk us through the changes that you made to that north elevation, the rear of that one building that we talked about?
Sure. So this comparative image here shows you on the left-hand side, the previous elevations. Oh, actually, this is the 8 unit. This is the 11 unit. And I think the idea applies to all of them. So, but this was the one that we talked about last time. So the courtyard elevation is at the bottom in both cases. And the rear elevation, which faces the parking, is at the top. You can see the comparative images, demonstrate that we added another roof form that lowers the roof that covers the circulation. And I imagine you can see my cursor, right?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a secondary roof form that helps diminish the overall scale. And then even the vertical punctuation, we've added more of them and reduced the size of them to bring the scale of the building down. We've modified the interval of the columns to better reflect the dimensions of the elements that are happening behind them. And then we've also, as this shows here, we've included stone at multiple locations across the back to kind of break up the material, to give a base to the building, and then to reflect some of the material qualities of the panorama building. So in the upper right-hand corner, this really is the image of the building looking south. So from the parking side, this is what it looks like.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ronnie, staying on this same image, I'm curious. I can't quite remember. We don't have a 3D perspective of that, the rear elevation of this building from the previous submittal. Were those upper roofs coming all the way out and covering those porches? Is that what you were doing before, and now you've cut them back?
Yeah, they were.
Okay. Is that the extent of the changes that you've made to the back of this building, and then also the 8-unit building? I think we had some issues with what you were calling the back of the building. Have you done similar changes? Can you show us that slide?
Yeah, definitely. It's similar in the types of modifications that have been made. So, again, the image on the left, if we're just talking about the area that faces the parking, there were 2 major gables. The height of the space that covered the 2nd-story walkway was much taller. We've reduced that. We've put in an intermediate roof form on this building as well. There's a jog in the building face here, and there are additional jogs on the upper floors. And I'm just going to go to the front for a second here. It's also worth pointing out that there are jogs at the front of the building that were not there before either. So we had 2 major planes that kind of ran, kind of bisecting this particular building. And now this building's footprint has a bay that steps forward that matches where the stone is on both of these elements, and then also a jog in the building in the middle.
Great, thank you. That's one.
question I have, and I think it's just your rendering style on the courtyard where you have your walkway and then it kind of steps down. That's just your illustration style to show elevation change, correct? Those are not.
It is. It's just those are topographic steps in the
That's what I
site.
thought.
So the site will roll down, obviously. There's no retaining wall there. That's the site rolling down. It just keeps the model at a smaller scale so we can do things like, work on it, rotate it.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ira?
I appreciate all the changes you've made. Just, it looks like from the windows and everything else, were you able to maintain the same floor plans inside?
More or less. We actually added some square feet to the building. And I know you can't see it on this, but there's additional area on the loft plans. Well, let me say, first of all of the units now have these bays that step forward. And so wherever there's a forward stepping bay, there's a little bit, like 10 square feet added to every main level plan. And then the upper floor plans, we actually dug into some of the nuances of small spaces in relation to the building code, more specifically about how the town of Frisco might interpret certain aspects of the building code with Rick. And what we ended up doing was adding a little bit more square footage in the second floor units, increasing them. Let me actually give you some real numbers here. Increasing the upper floor units to about 500 square feet. And that really takes shape in the loft area because it's like a 1.5 story unit. It takes place in the loft area, the upper area of those units.
No further questions.
My only question is that Phil mentioned that they're solar ready. Are you planning on installing solar panels at construction, or is this just
We're not.
a down the road thing?
It's not going to happen at this point in the project, but there is no gas served to this site. Well, there is gas there now. We're choosing to not service these buildings with gas, and making sure that we have enough roof area long-term so that we can get photovoltaic on the roof at a future point.
So are you doing electric heat then?
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you. Any additional questions? All right.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Can I just follow up on that one quick question? Is it simply a question of money that you're not putting solar in right now? I mean, it is one of the things that the town is really pushing is to increase the utilization of solar in the town of Frisco. So, I think it's great that we're getting workforce housing, but is there a reason other than money right at the moment?
No, they are financial decisions. I mean, I'm sure that the team would love to put photovoltaic on the roof. There are a lot of new additional costs like the electric charging stations. Obviously, we've added some square footage. We've added stone to the building. So incrementally, there's been some added cost. The goal is to make sure that we can keep the rental rates at rates that are reduced from market rate. So it truly is at this point an issue of how much it would cost to put photovoltaic on the roof.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronnie, for your presentation and all of your altercations to the project. So at this time, we will open it up to public comment. Couple ground rules. If you do wish to make a public comment on this agenda item, please state your name, address, keep it to 3 minutes, and please address the commission and not the applicant. So if you have public comment on this agenda item at this time, please either step up to the podium or raise your hand online. I'm seeing no public comment at this time, so we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item and move on to commissioner comments. Ira?
I think it's an admirable undertaking. I hope it turns out to be in that category. And you're moving quickly. I can see that the Peak One facility disappeared in about 2 days, so that was great. And I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you have no vacancies.
Looking forward to it being completed and doing the right thing to help people get housing. So kudos.
Andy?
Yeah, I appreciate the changes that you've made since the last submittal. I think a lot of them help the project. I still have concerns with the shed roofs over the back porches. We do have a clause in our code that says that building walls and corresponding eaves shall not exceed 27 feet in the same geometric plane. The 11-unit building has a 70-foot eave line. That seems excessive to me. Sure would love to see you break that up somehow. I personally don't think it meets the code right now. I know we've indicated that it meets the building articulation standards, but I think that that clause about and the eaves shall not exceed 27 feet to me is pretty clear. And I think you are exceeding 27 feet there with 70-foot of eaves. So for me, I'd like to see you do something to both of those shed roofs. I think they're a nice step in the right direction, but introduce maybe a new problem with the building articulation guidelines. So that's my comment.
I don't have any additional comments, same as everybody. I appreciate all the changes that were made. I think it looks better. And I also think the changes to the parking are going to make your project also better. So yeah, I hope you build it soon and you get some housing for your employees.
Patrick?
Thanks. I just, reiterate the comments of my fellow commissioners that the efforts here are not unrecognized. Everything looks amazing. I mean, I think it's going in a really good direction. Andy picked up on the same thing that I did with the elongated eave issue. And then my only other concern really is that I think it's the north and the south. It's definitely the south, but probably the north elevations of the 8-unit building. Having vertical siding that extends pretty much three floors high, near as I can figure. It seems like with the material palette that you've presented, it would be a pretty almost cost neutral switch to just break that up and give the building a little bit of a base, middle, top kind of a situation. So I would just encourage that those 2 short elevations just be looked at. Thank you.
Patrick?
Thanks.
On the street,
I would agree with both Andy and Patrick's comment that it would be nice to see that eave line shortened or broken up somehow. I too was troubled by that 3-foot high wall of gray. And if there's a way that we can break that up, that would be, in my opinion, it would enhance the view of that. I understand that you're within the compliance for an ADA unit, and I applaud you for having an ADA unit and having a type A unit. I wish that there was a way in which you could have a second unit more closely set up for type A that you could convert more easily. I think we live in a community where there are disabled people and we want to see them employed and we want to see them have access to this kind of housing. So if there was a way in which you could kind of modify a unit square footage wise so that it could later be converted more easily, I think that would assure that it would happen. Otherwise, I'm pretty convinced that you will never convert a unit if you have to move a wall. So those are my comments. But I think that the work that you've done and what you've done to respond to several of our comments were great. And I do like the look better, far better than I did the first time around.
Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work. We're all very excited about this project, and I agree with my fellow commissioners on those bikes and the plane. You know, I'm a little disappointed that solar panels aren't going in and that there's, you know, electric heat is the most expensive form of heat to run when you're trying to keep costs low and you have 9 months of winter. But certainly, you know, that is up to you. But I think that, you know, you're setting an example in this town by providing workforce housing. And if you could knock it out of the park and set an example for sustainability, that would be awesome as well. But I thank you for your time and all your efforts. And those are my comments.
Do you want a motion?
Certainly, what are your thoughts on this, you know, we have two people that don't really feel that it fits code in terms of some of those wall planes on the eave.
You could ask Ronnie to show those elevations and show how they've addressed that articulation on that side.
Yeah, like I'm looking at A104, for example, top left corner.
Ronnie, did you hear that? Would you mind showing us those articulations on those eaves there?
A104, I think, is the one.
That's what I was referring to. It's just because there's two views of the situation. So I'll just speak freely for a second. I mean, it's long. There's a rule that says no, but I also think to myself, what would I do differently at this point without totally upturning the apple cart?
It seems like maybe a gable at some point introduced into that fascia line, you know, if you could kind of direct your drainage a little bit as well. So it's not just sheet draining off of that whole area. We could direct some drainage maybe. I don't know. I feel like our code says no eaves longer than 27 feet and we have a 70-foot eave. So I'm kind of struggling with it. I sure would love to see a way to break that up. I don't know that it's our job to fix that problem, but I do see it as an issue.
Andy, you're talking,
Ronnie?
you're just so I understand, you're talking about that lower shed and not the eve of the.
Not the roof
main-
proper.
Not the roof proper, the lower decorative shed,
Added.
the covering over the walkway rather than the roof.
Yeah. The 11-story building, I calc that at 70 feet long, which is pretty long, pretty far over 27.
I think the addition is nice and, you know, maintenance aspect of keeping snow out of there, but
Yeah.
it is long.
And I just feel like, you know, it's for, again, you know, you've shown us a couple of the elevations from the street from Highway 9, but they're much further away than your pretty courtyard elevations. And I think that, you know, that especially that 11-unit building as you're coming south on Highway 9 is going to have a very, apologize for this, but a very Motel 6 look with that long shed roof like that and that long continuous porch and railing. And to me, it's the wrong spot for that. It's not the back of the building, and it's not one that personally I feel is appropriate for that side of the building.
I actually was going to make a comment similar to that, but I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
I don't have that problem.
But you know, it does lessen it cheapens the design, I think, a little bit. But I do agree that it, you know, does have some positives for snow, but it makes the back look a little dated and Western motel, you know, but
Right.
yeah.
There is no back.
Well, you know.
So Bill,
technically,
my question would be to Bill, how did staff look at that?
We looked at the primary roof form. And that is all broken up and articulated rather than applying that to the lower shed
Okay, but code wise, what does the code say?
eve
mean-
lines, which we interpreted as the main eve line of the roof.
So I think
Planning
it's a
commission,
little
you
gray.
can- Yeah, you can interpret it the other way as well.
Or- No.
Bill, I was just gonna ask, so in that long span, where you've got the stairways going up and it's covered all the way across, if there was, and I'm not an architect, a chunk taken out of the middle, so it would break it up. Now, yes, there would increase snow on that level, but it would break it up and maybe make it look a little bit more vertical.
Yeah, again, I don't know, because then that means we're dumping a lot of snow on that porch, so I would hate
Right.
to advise you to do that.
Or do you break it into thirds and you take some of it and then you pop it up a little bit? I don't know.
You've
Yeah.
got two stair towers in the middle of that. Maybe you could somehow play up those stairs a little bit as more of an architectural element. Put a different kind of roof form over the stairs. Again, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but for
pretty
me,
tight.
it's a problem.
Well, I mean, again, our job is to follow code, and if code says that you can't do that, then
Well, I've talked to Bill, I think about other projects, not this one in particular, about this code, and I do think that there is a little gray area. It says eave lines, it says walls and eave lines. We've talked about whether or not railings would have some projects, where
Right.
whether or not sort of semi-solid railings constitute a wall plane if they're unbroken. I think we established that they don't, but eave lines, I think, are pretty clear. And it says that eve
pretty-
lines can't exceed 27 feet. So to me, that's an eve line. It's not a major roof form eve line. So I guess that's, again, it's left up to the interpretation of the commission.
Do you think that if we added a condition of approval to say, I don't know what the standard is, Bill, but that, these, what are they called? Lower level eave roofs,
The shed roofs?
shed roofs
Mhm.
be revised to meet the requirements of that standard? Is something that,
A administrative adjustment on that
You are.
of what's that, 10%? Condition that it's brought, it wouldn't necessarily be 27 feet.
Pushing it up to 30.
Right. So you'd have to break it up, but once, there'd have to be a break in there somewhere. You couldn't have 7 feet of
So
line.
conditional approval is a potential.
well, we wouldn't see it again, you would see it, but I mean, at least they would work with staff to figure that out. Because
Yeah, I think
our
you're-
interpretation is that that is an eve and therefore that standard is not being addressed, right?
I think we could give direction to that effect, yeah, and then Bill would be left to interpret the resubmittal in terms of whether or not that eve has been brought into compliance, or at least within administrative adjustment.
A couple administrative adjustments available to these non-residential standards. And the one that would apply here would be the maximum length of building walls and corresponding roof eaves without a change in the same geometric plane, and that deviation is up to 75%. So that would allow you to go up to 42 feet without breaking.
so then they'd only need one break on a
They would.
70-foot,
Yeah.
current 70-foot
We'd
eve.
have one instead of
But
nine
what's nice about that is it allows a whole variety of different
solutions.
explorations.
Yes. Yeah, it's just, we don't want anything 50 feet or more. I think I calc the 8-unit building is 56 feet in length, so that one would have to be broken up by that standard just a little bit as well. It could be at one end or the other, or it could be centered. The 11-unit building would probably end up somewhere in the middle.
Wait, so do they need any administrative adjustments or can we just say that they need to meet the standard?
The administrative adjustment will allow them to go from 27 to 42.25. So as a planning commission, you could make a condition and frame it such that you are approving an administrative adjustment up to the full 75% for these lower shed roof forms to increase the articulation with the maximum eve length for those lower forms of the 42.
I'd be comfortable with that condition.
Agreed.
What were you going to say, Lena?
I guess I just don't know why we're automatically assuming they need an administrative adjustment. It seems to me like they should just meet the standard.
Because if they met the standard, then they'd have to have 2 breaks on the long building. On the 11-unit building,
Which isn't,
because it's 70 feet now, and if the standard's 27 and there's no adjustment granted, that they'd have to find 2 breaks in that
Okay,
building.
but do you need our, I guess, permission to say that it's okay to do the administrative adjustment? You do need
Yes.
that, okay.
Projects that are reviewed by commission, that's within your authority.
If you give them the adjustment, they have more opportunity to explore design opportunity variables. As opposed to if we stick to the letter of the code, like the 11 unit building, to me, it's gonna be like a pop-up in the middle or one of these in the middle, because they have to basically create two breaks, but essentially cut it into some version of thirds or three pieces.
Okay.
But if we went for the full one, maybe it just does that. Who knows? But
What do you guys think about that center section? The stairway goes up here and here, and then you've got, and they both sort of meet in that center. If that center unit popped out and the roof was eliminated there, and then the door could be on the side, it would bring the whole building out. You know,
I
just to
think
make
they
it more
have-
interesting.
I think they have a lot of options.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, they can explore how they'd like to go. If we decide that we want to see those articulations, then they can figure out what makes the most sense for them. I think if, you know, if we granted the adjustment, the full adjustment, and we are getting at least one major break in both of those roof planes, that's gonna help those,
Mhm.
those.
Is it gonna
lines.
make it uglier?
Well, I hope not. They don't want to make it uglier.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like through this process,
And then
They've-
it's ugly now.
through the process
If you
and
Squeeze, something in that doesn't work on the design. It'd be a fatal flaw.
They can figure it out.
through the process and the deferral multiple times to come back to us, I feel like they've really been working hard. The applicant's been working very hard to appease everyone, not only just town of Frisco, but all the municipal bodies and the other stakeholders and everybody. I feel like the administrative variance or whatever we're calling that is meeting halfway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's totally appropriate to give them variance at this stage.
Especially that it's workforce housing. This isn't just for
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah.
Not-
Yeah. So do we want to entertain a motion? with-
I will-
Well, I have one more question for Bill, and that is on that 3-story wall that shows up as a single, is that totally within code? We can't say anything other than ask them to,
Recommendation.
You can certainly ask the
Yeah.
architect if they need one to-
Okay.
modification.
okay. You know, go ahead.
Okay. With respect to file number MAJ 210002, I move that the recommended findings set forth in the June 17th, 2021 staff report be made and that the recommended conditions set forth therein be taken with the addition of a condition. So will you help me? What? Yeah, okay.
So let me make a recommendation on a finding.
Okay.
first, That in addition to the findings outlined in your staff report, the planning commission also finds that the application meets the review criteria for an administrative adjustment as outlined in section 182.7.2, letter D. Based upon that finding, planning commission is making a condition that the applicant modify the second floor shed roof elements to add additional articulation to not exceed a dimension of 27 feet with an administrative adjustment of up to 75% of that standard. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
You gotta get closer to your microphone.
Say all that.
Okay. And therefore, the planning commission hereby approves the request for the major site plan application for the proposed Ventura Studios mixed-use project.
Second,
Cheryl, will you please take a vote?
Commissioner Scupian,
Yes.
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesmes,
Yes.
Commissioner Franken,
yes,
Commissioner Tain,
Yes.
Commissioner Withrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your hard work, and we look forward to seeing this project getting built.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Don.
Yes, I will crack some windows here and
Be everything.
yeah, we'll certainly do that. And as a reminder, as we're speaking, we have heard that it is a little bit difficult to hear for those folks that are listening on Zoom. So when you speak, please lean forward to as close as you can to the mic. And just so that does pick it up a little bit. We're not quite there yet. They're on order though, so.
But make a suggestion to move the mics closer.
We actually have those on order and we will be, that is something that is being worked on. So.
Okay. I missed that.
All right, we will move on to agenda item number 2, planning file number MAJ-21-001. A review of the sketch plan step of the major site plan application for a proposed commercial project located at 731 Granite Street, Lot E, Mount Royal Square subdivision. Applicant John Gunson representing River Edge Associates LLC. And I will turn it over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Kelsey. So we have John Gunson is present for when you get to the part where the applicant is going to give a presentation. So as you saw in his application materials, he is proposing 2 restaurants within the one structure at Mount Royal Plaza. And I'm just going to slow down for a second and pull up his plans so that you have them up. And I'm trying to get that extra to go away and it's not, so I apologize. Okay. So Mr. Gunson's property is located within the Central Core District, but also the Mount Royal Plaza development site. And I think a few of you were on the Planning Commission when we had another building come through on this site. It's a little bit unique within Mount Royal Plaza, where the overall parking, snow storage, drainage, landscaping, and utilities were all constructed with the overall development site. And so a lot of that has already been addressed and taken care of. And then we look at certain features with vacant lots such as this one today. So the one thing to point out on this lot that was important through the development site was that there is a gross leasable area of 5,000 square feet. And we did have to make sure that was being followed, which the applicant is. There's also a parking allocation of 10 spaces for this lot. And through Central Core District, the proposed uses doesn't actually even require any parking. So in theory, there's 10 excess parking spaces provided in that lot with the proposed residential or retail uses. The community plan was referenced in the staff report, including the inclusive community and the thriving economy. The setbacks are all being complied with, as is building height and all of the other requirements in the Central Core District. You will see a traffic study submitted with the final stage of the site plan when the applicant submits for that stage. The landscaping and lighting is all shown in compliance on what the applicant has submitted so far, and we'll continue to verify that at the final stage of that major site plan also. The biggest topics to talk about for you are going to be non-residential development standards and then bulk plane encroachments. So for non-residential development standards, as you're all well aware, as you just discussed it with your last item, there are the building articulation standards in the code, and the north elevation, north facade is not quite meeting that required breaks in the facade. We have spoken a lot with Mr. Gunson about that. He is aware of it. He's going to adjust it. We also discussed if there was any way that if he changed and called North Summit Boulevard the front, because he could pick a front, would that adjust? But he really didn't feel comfortable just calling that the front to try to make things work. So he's going to go work on that building articulation before he submits for the final site plan. Planning staff is recommending that you offer him any feedback you have, but as you just noted, it does have to meet the town code on that north facade. The same thing for the roof standards. There's a ridge line on the north elevation is a little bit more than 66%. And so that will need some type of break. And then just to give a little background, the reason that the applicant didn't show that for sketch plan, those roof standards and the building articulation was because earlier in the non-residential development standards, there's the building elements which don't have certain requirements if you can see it from a parking lot or a street. And so because of that, the applicant just thought you saw it from a parking lot or street and he didn't have to provide the articulation. So that was kind of a miscommunication a little bit along the lines between the town code, town staff and the applicant that came out as we were writing the staff report. So just a little background, he wasn't trying to not comply with the code. It was just some misunderstanding in how that code is interpreted. And we also requested that you provide general comments on how his variety of materials and colors. He did give you a good narrative where he stated how he designed it to have the building look like two separate structures to better relate to the scale of the neighborhood. So feel free to offer any comments on the design that he has proposed. And then the one last item is bulk plane encroachments. As you know, the planning commission is permitted to allow up to 350 cubic feet. The applicant is proposing 23 cubic feet. So you have a very small area on the pitched roof element. And so that we're looking for some comments from if the planning commission feels that it provides substantial architectural relief, having that 23 cubic feet that's proposed on the roof eave. And in your staff report that was circled to try to show you, it's even a little bit difficult to kind of find it. But hopefully through the staff report, you saw where that was, since it is a pretty minor encroachment. That pretty much sums up this one for you, and then let me know if you have any questions. Yeah.
I had to actually go to this property because I couldn't believe there was a piece of property there. I've driven granite. I mean, I used to, before they screwed it up and made granite not an exit to the town anymore. I've driven by it all the time and didn't even know that this property was there. I don't have any questions, but I'd like to reserve the right.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
Patrick, any questions for staff?
No, I think it was outlined. I'll save my comments.
Lena?
Why were the plans upside down and sideways and?
That is just how they were submitted. I'll let Mr. Gunson address how he does his designs if you would like. And you're welcome to come up to the lectern now so you can hear better if you would like.
Quick question, Katie, on the building articulation. The north side of the building is right up against an existing building. And so it seems like that's an elevation that really won't be seen very much.
It
compared
is,
to
but the
last
code
project.
doesn't have that requirement for the articulation.
So there's no distinction in the code if it's
Then
a
it's-
visible
There is
elevation.
for building elements, but not for building articulation.
Okay.
And staff agrees with you, but we couldn't find a way. And there will be 10 feet between the buildings because there's a 5-foot setback. And then the other building does have a small little break in it if you take a look.
Does it fit within the administrative adjustment?
I did not look at that. We can take a look at that.
Curious to know that because
Take a look.
this one seems less.
I think Mr. Gunson would agree with you.
Yeah, it's if it's the other building, you know, it's not Highway 9.
So Katie, what's the max height is like 26 feet?
Proposed, correct.
And but for the entire HOA, how close your building?
Oh, no, it's a lot taller than that. It's by the Central Core District.
So the building could go up to 35 feet. Okay.
But just remember, a lot of the uses would require parking, and that would get a little bit tricky, potentially. So,
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Ira, any questions for staff?
I heard the bulk plane encroachment was very minor, so I'm okay with that. I mean, but there's one thing I just don't know. What is that ladder on the north elevation? I mean, I figured that's what it is.
Roof access.
In a fancy way.
Wow. In a necessary way, without having a stair inside that costs more money.
Got it.
That would be my guess.
And since there's only 10 feet between buildings.
But why does it, is it permanent?
Fireworks.
If we ever have them again. All right, any other questions for staff at this time? I have none. We will turn it over to you, Mr. Gunson, and let you give your presentation.
Thank you. As Katie said, I'm John Gunson. I've actually worked as an architect in Breckenridge. Please don't hold that against me. For 40 years. And that's given me the opportunity to actually work not only in buildings in Breckenridge, but really all over Colorado, in ski towns, ski areas, mountain areas, just because I've specialized in that type of architecture. So it's been a lot of fun and a lot of creativity involved. But I have yet to design a building in Frisco, so hopefully you'll allow me to remedy that with this building. Having said that, I decided to try to solve that in some way myself by purchasing Lot E in Mount Royal Plaza, which is, you may recognize it as the only vacant lot in the whole plaza, and is fairly prominent as you along that corner of Granite Street and Summit Boulevard. The reason that I bought that was because I wanted to design my own building, because I like Frisco because it really is a forward thinking, and I'm not just saying that to try to gain points, but I've told their staff several times, and they'll forgive me, I hope, for restating this again, but I have to say that your development code is, having designed in many, many communities, is really the best that I've encountered. And I'm saying that sincerely because it really does guide an architect toward creating a good design and a good building, which benefits everyone. So I have tried to work, and I feel that I have worked within that, and your staff has been great to work with. But my lot, as I mentioned, is on Granite Street. And one of the first things I try to do with any building in any community is to actually look at the scale of it in relation to other buildings near it that are not likely to be removed. And along Granite Street, many of the buildings are of a smaller scale. They're typically maybe about 40 feet wide, which conforms to some of the historic lot lines that were maybe 50-foot lot lines. And so the buildings tend to be of a smaller scale. So I felt it would be more appropriate to, rather than having my buildable area is 80 feet long along Granite Street. And I felt that size of a building would be out of scale with the neighborhood. So what I'm proposing is to build two structures with a joining party wall, but the two structures are each 40 feet each in length along Granite Street. So it reduces the scale but also so that they weren't, I didn't want to, and I think you would prefer not to have them a mirror image, which I tried to be able to create them as two individual looking structures, each with its own character. And with that in mind, I thought it would be good to give one that maybe is facing more towards Summit Boulevard, a more traditional look, more of a mountain look. And the one that's facing inward towards Mount Royal Plaza, perhaps a what's now called mountain modern look, if you will. And you've heard that buzzword a few times, I'm sure. But to give it a little bit more upbeat look, because the intention is to have, as I mentioned, 2 separate restaurants, ideal, and they would have separate kitchens, entries, dining facilities, interiors would be different. And so I was trying to give each one of them their own identity by breaking them down into 2 40-foot structures. The other thing about this lot in Mount Royal Plaza is that it allows 5,000 square feet of leasable area. And once again, having helped actually written a lot of the code in Breckenridge, and some other communities, I just felt that that was again out of scale with other buildings along Granite Street. And so I felt that it would be better to try to reduce the scale by putting 1/3 of that space is actually below grade. Now it's the fact that they are restaurants gives me the opportunity to put the kitchens below grade. It's a lot of up and down for staff, but on the other hand, I think it makes a more not only interesting building, but a building that fits better in that neighborhood. So to reduce the mass, I put about 30% of that 5,000 square feet below grade. That reduces the mass, the bulk of the building. And it also let me reduce the height, maybe a little deceiving to see the height because these are elongated windows and doors and so forth. But it really isn't as tall as it looks. It's the flat roofed portion, the straight horizontal lower line there. The top of that is just 20 feet above ground. So it's really not that tall. And the other elements, the peaked elements are 23 feet for the lower ones and 35 feet for the taller ones, except for that center area that Katie pointed out. The reason for that is, and I hope you would allow that intrusion into the bulk plane. It's only 23 cubic feet into that bulk plane, but it is I think a significant architectural element in delineating and defining 2 separate structures. And also, and it doesn't show up too well on the elevation, but that area to the left side of the peak is actually recessed in because to relieve the whole front facade of the building. By relieve, I mean to add some interest in and out interest, and also to meet your code of that requirement to offset it 6 feet for a width of 8 feet. And so that does that. And it so I think it isn't just a tacked add-on, it becomes a part of the architecture because that creates that inset. It divides the 2 spaces. And in order to do that, I would like to have that opportunity of the peaked gable to define it even further. Having said all that, I think this all helps to maintain the scale of the historic buildings and many of the buildings along Main Street that are not all that tall. And we all know that, just as an aside, speaking towards the 2 restaurants, I know that it may be a surprise, but rather than 1 large restaurant, I felt that it would be better to create 2 smaller ones not just because of the of a potential tenant, but mostly, as I described before, to separate those into two smaller structures and to point out that we all know that Summit Boulevard gets hundreds and even thousands of cars passing by virtually every day. And this will be one of the structures that those cars see. And I hope that it will draw people. They're not going to take a sharp left turn. They can't onto Granite Street, but hopefully it will draw them onto Main Street. And what that means is that those people passing by hopefully will not pass by because people don't spend their money in a car while they're driving a car. Where they spend their money is if we encourage them to come into your town, to park their cars, get out, enjoy a walk, venture into the commercial buildings and the restaurants, and spend their money there. And that adds appeal and interest, and it attracts visitors to Frisco. Finally, I'd like to make a pitch, and you probably are already aware of that restaurants actually provide more jobs and more revenue to the town, and more customers, of course, than retail office uses. So I think that restaurants should be encouraged as a part of this is my point of view, of course, as a prospective landlord, but I think that restaurants have a lot to contribute to create a sense of community, but also to create a significant amount of income for that community. So that's what I have to present at this moment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that presentation. Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You're going to go below ground for a part of this building. How are you going to deal with the issues of water since I live in the building right across the street, which has an underground parking garage, which probably never should have had an underground parking garage. And we, in most years, this year being the exception, always have problems with water in our basement area. So how are you going to deal with that on this?
That's a very good question. And I felt I was worried about the same thing. I hired a soils engineer to excavate an area. I won't be going down 12 feet, but he did dig down 12 feet to look for signs of high water table, stratified areas that would chemically darken or lighten an area.
Right.
And he did that in 2 spots on the property, and did not find any indication of that high groundwater. I agree with you, however, it'd be good to have a backup plan of sump pump type of methods to drain underneath, so we don't get that bubbling up.
I mean, I will tell you that in our building, it is, most of the year we're fine and everything is dry. But there are the spring runoff times when all of a sudden water shows up from places that I have no idea where. But second thing, on the south elevation that I'm looking at, I mean, is this building straight across or is it sort of articulated slightly?
It's actually just straight across.
Okay.
The ends, it's a little hard to make out, but on each of these elevation drawings, the ends are angled at a 45-degree angle. The gables are actually angled at 45 degrees to see that on the plan here. Thank you, Katie. You can see how they're angled, and those are to reduce the length of the facade. But more importantly, or every bit of that's certainly important, but also to create interest and so the gabled ends create an accent, if you will, on the facade. Now, on that north facade, you can still see that the ends, the east and west ends are angled, and those will have a gabled and windows in those as well.
So the view from Highway 9 coming north would be very similar to the south elevation view.
Exactly.
with
Well, what you would.
Kind of slightly to the side.
It would be to the side. We can show that west elevation, if you would, Katie, the version of that, but let's see, the east elevation. So it would be showing here, I mean, the east elevation. I'm sorry, you had it right. This would be, the east elevation is what you would be seeing from Highway 9. And so as you drive past Podium Sports, this would be, you'd see the angled end first. If you're heading south, you'd see this angled window area first, and then the flat facade of the other windows along that runs parallel to the road, the Highway 9 or Summit Boulevard. And then on the far corner is another angled area. And the reason for those doors, they go all the way down to the ground. The reason for that is the ones on the, can you point to those, Katie, please? The arrows on the, for that far left, the left corner
doors
there
right there,
of the
yeah.
building, right
Yeah.
there. Those buildings go to the ground because that provides access onto a small patio area for outdoor dining.
Two additional questions. Are you planning to work with the town to put a sidewalk in front of that, in front of your property or in front? And I know we're working on granite, but that would be a part of it as well as around the corner on 7th.
Yes.
So that, and because you're at grade, are there any issues with accessibility in this building?
Totally accessible. The contours, the grade will need to be modified slightly. The grade actually, and surprisingly to me, it actually slopes down towards the highway slightly, but overall the lot is very flat. But it will be totally accessible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Only one simple one, I think, and this is maybe not even for you, but I'm looking at Google Earth right now and I'm watching the bus parking right there next to the lot and a pull-off. Is there any issue with like bus?
It's been
This probably should have been a staff question, but is there?
It's been relocated, that bus stop.
Perfect, thanks.
As a result of the gap, that northbound turning movement onto Granite is no longer an
Not
option.
allowed.
Bus can't be
So
there.
Bus is now relocated where it comes off 8th Avenue, comes down Water Tower, and there's a bus stop on the east side of 7th, at the southeast corner of 7th and Granite. Yes.
No more questions, thank you.
Lena?
I guess my only question is, what is the purpose of that one plan sheet where items are upside down and sideways? Sorry, could you hear me?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
This plan sheet, what is the reason for? You scanned it?
She just wants to know why all the images aren't the same way.
Why it's laid out in a circle.
Yeah.
Right, why? Well, I thought it would be helpful, perhaps mistakenly on my part, but I thought that rather than having 4 separate sheets, it would be easier to compare the elevations by placing them around so that essentially you have to rotate the paper, but it does give you a perspective on to see the relationship of the elevations one to another. And that's the reason that I did it that way, that you could also compare the heights, I put some cross sections in here so that you can see the roof pitch and how it works with the floor plan, the levels, how they work with and so I apologize if it's confusing and takes a little more explanation on my part, but if the review board prefers, I can do a separate elevation of each.
It's
I
okay.
mean,
I just,
section.
I've never seen this before, so.
Yeah, just a couple. Oh, yeah. First of all, since I'm before Donna tonight, I'm gonna ask why you don't have roof decks before she does.
Sorry, what?
Roof decks. It seems like an amazing location for putting some program on the roof. Getting views of the lake, getting views of the mountains. I mean, the views from that roof are going to be spectacular. Did you consider putting some dining tables up there or anything?
It's an excellent idea, and I would certainly entertain that. I think it's a great idea. I will, with your permission, I'll try to work out a stairway access there. What my hesitation was and still is that I'm not sure that I can make, well, I'm very sure that I can't make it handicapped accessible. And that I'm very conscious of that, having myself somewhat handicapped and relatives, but I'm conscious of that, and I really didn't want to create that type of an issue.
That actually starts to get into my second question with the, you alluded to the wait staff having to go up and down a bunch of stairs. Did you consider putting an elevator in that central core that could then get you to the roof and have the roof accessible? And then would maybe help your wait staffs out a little bit?
Well, I understand. I have looked into that, and I actually, I don't know whether you've been to the Bluefish Sushi restaurant in Breckenridge, but I designed that. It has a elevator that goes 3 stories and down into the, as well as down into the kitchen. The reason for that was that it very narrow lot, only 28 feet wide. And so, but I just felt that I guess Katie, I hate to bother you with this, but could you go to the floor plan that shows the levels of here we go. So if you can make out if you look at the where it says entry level floor plan, there are the 2 restrooms there that are handicapped accessible restrooms, and those are shared by each half of the building. Each restaurant, separate restaurant, but they share their restrooms. But if we look, first of all, at the east, that's the one on the right, the east building. First of all, there are stairs that go, the one flight goes down into the kitchen and the other flight goes up into the balcony area. So the balcony area is elevated about 5 feet above the main dining area. That's one of the reasons is to create interest. The other reason is that I can put the kitchen, the same is true on the left-hand side, by the way, just a different shape. But now if we could scan down to the lower level, Katie, what would I do without you?
Sorry, I'm a little slow.
I've said that more than once over the past few months. But what this does is create the kitchen level that is, when I say only, it's only about 7 feet down because it's under that balcony.
No, I get that, and I I understand wanting to avoid an elevator if possible. It just sort of in conjunction with, boy, it sure would be neat to get people on the roof. Maybe an elevator could help facilitate that. So it's just a suggestion and where it's sketch plan. So certainly not a code issue, but I was curious if you had considered that. Last question then, on the building articulation that Katie mentioned on the north side. She said that you had already discussed that. Do you have a plan for that? You already know how you're gonna fix that?
Well, other than getting on my knees and begging, I don't yet have a have a solution for that. I guess the part that I would point to, and I haven't had a chance to really get into it, but this area really won't be seen from any public area. And it's only 10 feet away from the building on the north. So I'm troubled by the requirement. I mean, I know laws are laws and codes are codes, but it seems, for lack of a more harsh word, I'll say unfortunate, that I would have to create a recess that serves no useful purpose. No one can see it, no one will see it except the guy that's mowing the grass between the two buildings. So I would welcome some relief from having to do that, but I don't know whether that's a too complicated of a code change. But it seems like, as I mentioned to Bill and to Katie, I've written a lot of codes myself for different mountain municipalities. And it's difficult to foresee every situation, to see every possibility. And so at certain times, the exceptions might be appropriate. I would leave it up to the board and the staff if they would be willing to support it, but to say that this might be an appropriate area to, and here's my knee pads for begging, that it might be appropriate area to allow that exception. But
Okay, thank you. I don't have.
Donna, questions for the applicant?
No, just comments that I made in the question.
In the beginning, you were saying the buildings, the businesses are completely separate.
yes,
But then you got to my favorite part, which are bathrooms. And they're shared, right?
that's correct.
And what about downstairs in the kitchen area? It doesn't look like there's any facility down there for staff.
No, well, there will be wash sinks there. There won't be toilets there, but there will be wash sinks for the staff and there's another within that 30, within that square footage that's still allowable, that 3,000 square feet that I mentioned, of the main building, you'll see another area that goes down with another short flight of stairs. And that is still within the allowable square footage. But that is again down another 3 feet, and it can be used for dry storage and that type of thing that restaurants always need. But in that area where it says the storage level goes down to 90 feet, 8 inches, that area would have a lower ceiling. It would, as I mentioned, it would be for like dry storage, which restaurants always need, plates and grains and different things that don't need refrigeration. But that goes under the dining room. So that's the reason for this extra set of stairs, that it goes down lower still.
So I'm just gonna assume that the bathroom accommodations meet the health department requirement.
Yes, I've checked that, and it does, as far as numbers of stalls and sinks, meets the code requirements
Okay.
for the
Yeah,
number
other
of
than that north elevation, I don't have anything else to say.
Thank you, Myra. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? I have none, so I thank you for your presentation, and we will move on to public comment at this time.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Guns. You can have a seat now, and
all right, thank you for your input.
absolutely. So at this time, we will move on to the public portion comment section of this agenda item. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand, state your name, address, and please keep it to 3 minutes and direct the commission and not the applicant.
All the Zoom attendees on my screen, so I can see them, but I don't see any.
Look here. So we will close this portion of the public comment and move on to commissioner comments. Robert.
I like the concept of having two restaurants.
Remember to lean in.
Oh, I like the concept of having, and leaning. It's hard on my back. I remember,
This
I'm
is not
the,
ADA compliant.
remember, I'm the one who had surgery 6 weeks ago.
I know, I keep trying to pull it.
I like the concept of restaurants. I think it will help that corner immensely. I like the design, and I even like I'm gonna regret saying this. I even like the book plane encroachment, which you will probably never hear me say again. But I like that. I like that design element, and I think it will look good. I will want to see what it looks like from Summit Boulevard, both directions, on the at Major. I would encourage you to we have way too many restrooms in this town that meet code like just barely. And women get shafted in that most often. So I would encourage you to think about, is there a way that you can go slightly above code and be a little bit more generous? There are a lot of, I did the count on the number of seats in your restaurant, and there's 14 tables in one of them, and there's like 16 tables in the other one. That's a lot of people sharing the restroom. I'm the one who pushes on accessibility a lot. So I appreciate your concern about balconies and accessibility, or I mean, roofs and accessibilities, but I don't think I don't think that, for me, I wouldn't ding you if you wanted to put a roof top in there. And I don't know, code would allow it, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, with a stair access, although I'd prefer the elevator access. But I do think it's a great place for a roof. I don't know how we get around the long articulate, or the long piece, especially after we just beat up somebody to make them do it. I'll let other architects figure that out. I'm not an architect. Otherwise, I'm supportive of the project. I think it will actually help the lot across the street on the south side that is going to have to put in 20% commercial, and wasn't thrilled with our saying that they had to do that. So I think that will be a positive for this. And I think it's a great way to highlight the town of Frisco, especially coming from the south.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you for being a women's restroom pioneer here on this. I appreciate it.
This is my second time in a row.
Marina, now here.
So Patrick, we'll move on to you, and I just want for everybody we're looking for feedback feedback on the facades, materials, colors, that North Ridge line and the bulk plane approach.
And I will interject, Bill did the math for us on the administrative adjustment, and it got to where he could extend it up to 47.25 feet.
Again, another 47.
He's proposing about 54 feet in length, so super close, but doesn't quite get him there.
So for me, in this particular case, I know it sounds strange, but I'm not so concerned about the north because it's an alley. I mean, it's something that people really aren't going to touch too much. My bigger concerns are, I appreciate the thought that's gone into making it feel like two different buildings. My architectural sensibility says it's kind of, we've got a yin and a yang thing going on a bit. And I feel like they're so far apart. I'm more inclined to be personally receptive to something that is subtle shifts in materiality or shades of things instead of an A and a B, an apple and an orange. And right now it feels like these two things kind of collided together. I totally understand the need to max out the site. I mean, dirt is expensive. It's the right thing to do. It's a commercial spot, but architecturally, I feel like the two halves don't talk to one another. They kind of run into one another. So something to worth considering. And it may be as simple as just the roof is just metal. Just, using one material. I'm not going to try and solve the issue, but there's unifying elements that bring the two halves together, perhaps, instead of both halves being distinctly different. Personally, I know that we had this conversation with Centura, but the really light material siding that's described as one half of the project, for me, it kind of jumps out a lot. You get light materials in the sunshine and it just screams. So that's something I would, instead of light and medium, perhaps there's medium and darker or something just worth consideration. Yeah, so really, I mean, it's about the architectural identities of the two halves. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything that Patrick just said. Thank you for saying it. I wasn't sure how I was gonna make that comment, but I completely agree. I like the idea of two separate. Well, first of all, I really like that there's two different restaurants in this space. I do think that is a good use of this site. But the architecture to me does exactly what Patrick just says. It just looks like it was put together. They're way too different, the two halves. And it just doesn't look like it's cohesive or thought out from a bigger perspective. And so, yeah, so those are my comments. I fully agree with what Patrick just said. I like the restaurants. I do think you need to add some articulation to that north side. And I guess I like the materials and the colors of the east side more than the west side. So, and the bulk lane, I don't think is too much of a big deal. I'm really more concerned about this looking more like it goes together rather than just complete opposites thrown together.
Yeah, well, first of all, as somebody that spends a lot of time at that end of Granite Street, I will definitely appreciate a couple new restaurants down there. So I'm a big fan of your program. I in general like the architecture, but I think I'm right in the camp with Patrick and Lena. I would like to see the two sides complement each other a little bit more. They don't have to match, whether it's stone that goes across that line or roofing or window patterns or whatever. But at this point, with everything changing, I do think they're a little too contrasting. So I would like to see them complement each other a little bit more. But I won't go into that anymore. I think other than that, the bulk plane, I don't have a problem with the bulk plane either. 23 cubic feet of a nicely decorated gable end. That's what that rule is for. So I don't have an issue with that. As far as the building articulation, it's funny to get these two projects back to back, but yeah, this one I don't have as big a problem with. I would encourage you guys to find a way use that administrative adjustment. You have my permission to use all of it on that north side. If he can make some small adjustments to get within that 47.25, I would encourage you to approve that. But yeah, I think overall it's a great project and I can't wait to see the next round.
Donna?
May I ask a question for Katie in
Yes.
regards to that north elevation? Would it be enough to be able to, if this was the common wall between the two restaurants, to come in and have a little cutout section for the, there, would that be enough to break it up? And if that was all windows, if you're inside the restaurant, then you have some natural light coming in there. So I was just wondering, would that, a section being kicked in be enough to make that adjustment?
It was a minimum length of 6 feet and 2 feet deep. Then yes. Yep, that's the minimum that they can provide.
It could help the interior bringing some light in, so I just was curious about that. I love that something will be built on this lot. And because coming from being on the highway, it really needs to be, in my opinion only, more spectacular. No offense, to me, this looks like a shopping center strip. And that I think it could be more interesting to do different roof lines. I wish that it could be to the, and correct me, and this is where I'm confused. With this bulk plan encroachment, which I have no problem with, but I thought the building height could be 45 feet.
It can, but the way the bulk plane, it goes up and in.
Oh, because of the lot.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
So yeah, you can go up more, but more centered up. And that's why buildings get angled.
So I would take advantage of trying to, I mean, it's just my opinion, to make it less suburban. It almost has a quaintness to be very almost historic and cabin-like. But Frisco wants to be cool. And I just see this as a great opportunity to do something. The location is so important. And granted, it's in scale to the other buildings in the HOA, but those other buildings are how many years old? This is an opportunity to kick it up a notch. So, but I'm excited, so excited. So can't wait to see the next round.
Thank you, Donna. Ira, comments for the applicant? Please lean in as well.
Leaning. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the work here. Again, I'll compliment Patrick on putting it together. I mean, the building is the same address. Both restaurants have the same address, and I think the building should look like the same address. And I think that it would be an easier task to give the building more panache as one building than trying to make it look like two buildings, because what is it? I mean, a pig with lipstick is still, you're just changing it a little bit, but it's really one building, and we can't control the restaurant business. And I think that there's a real possibility you get a good restaurant in there, they're going to want both halves. So I think it as one building, as Patrick was saying, more continuity of the roof materials, the siding materials. I'd look closely at that tan color, really not an appreciated color. The bulk plane, no problem. The north side, I don't really have a big problem with it. There's not a lot of sunlight coming in on that side. There's not a great view if you do have a bunch of glass on that side. So I think I'm just going to stick with, instead of trying to make one building look like two, I think you might be better off making it look like one. That's it.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you very much for bringing this to us tonight, Mr. Gunson. I echo some of the similar comments on that it is too different. But I really like the use of glass. I like kind of this combination of rustic historical meets mountain modern kind of idea, because I think mountain modern, you want that sawtooth smile on our main street, that you have the 90s next door and the 20s here, and that you can bring this corner and activate it and entice it. Where on the other corner of the plaza, it's an older building, and high sides kind of signage gets lost in the bulkness of that building, and where I think you can use a lot of your elements in here to really highlight that corner. But I agree that it could be a little bit more continuous. And on the north side, we're not here to set precedents. Last applicant had a very dominant view corridor. This doesn't. It doesn't bother me. I'll leave it up to others and staff to kind of fix that, but I don't have a problem with that. Neither do I have a problem with the bulk plane encroachment. I think it's very minimal. It adds architectural relief. And I'm really excited for this corner to be activated and have more restaurants. And I think it's a very creative building. So I appreciate all your efforts.
Can I make one additional comment?
Of course.
Just, the only thing I want to say is that I value the fact that it feels like two different buildings.
Mhm.
I would agree that there may be too much difference in them, but I totally understand why you're trying to go to two different restaurants and being able to lease both of them. I would hope that, I disagree. I would hope that nobody comes and takes up this whole space. I think Frisco doesn't need restaurants that huge. So I think we are a different town than that, but that's my opinion as a commissioner. And since I didn't talk about the look of the building before, I wanted to make sure that I laid my opinion out on the table in that regard.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments at this time? Well, we look forward to seeing you back, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Would you mind if I had a question about, I hear different opinions on. Thank you. I'm hearing suggestions of perhaps trying to create a different look, but also others with a liking, like the dissimilar from one side to the other, and some with wanting it a little more similar. I'm torn between the two myself, but I wanted the tenant, restaurateur, to have the possibility and the identity of a separate look, so that it wasn't just like the mall or something where they would be just a hole in the wall kind of repetition. So that was the reason that I was, and perhaps I went overboard in being a little too drastic with the more contemporary look. Do you think it would be acceptable to tone that back a bit and still have a separate identity? Or do you want it even more similar to each other, do you think?
Everybody's gonna have their opinion. My personal one is, I think there's a middle ground.
I'm sorry.
I think there is a middle ground.
Oh.
Right now, it's just stark, and there is literally a line on the elevation. And
Okay.
it's stuff over here and stuff over there.
And I'd be happy to live with the middle ground.
I think, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think toning it back, your suggestion of just toning it back. I don't think necessarily everybody's looking for it all to be one building. Ira can speak for himself in a minute here, but but I think if you just tone it back and let them work together a little bit more, you'd make me happier, I think, personally.
Okay.
And maybe some of the others.
Ira?
I think architecture and the restaurant business are completely separate. I have always believed that if you've got a good restaurant, and you've got the goods, if you're on a busy street or a quiet street, people are going there. So the restaurant makes the restaurant. I don't think the architecture is going to make the restaurant. But you have the opportunity with the architecture, because coming in from your hometown of Breckenridge, I mean, there's a big statement there. And I think that you have that ball in your court and, you know, with some modifications of dissimilarizing the buildings, a little bit more unity might be to, you know, which is what we're saying. You know, not that we just take the eraser and make it all one building.
Okay.
But like I said, I'll just go back to I think the restaurant business is totally separate from architecture. And hopefully you get people in there that know what they're doing restaurant wise.
Sure.
That's all.
I think you could take subtle shifts too and just kind of making the siding maybe cohesive, but not the rocks or the entrances. You know, obviously this is all just suggestion and opinions and it has to fit into the code. But you know, I think there is a middle ground here where it feels a little more cohesive, but can have its individual identities is what we're kind of all saying.
Okay,
If that's helpful.
thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And we will close agenda item number 2. Does anybody need a 5-minute break or want to charge? All right, we will adjourn for 5 minutes. Back at, let's say, 6:55.
All right.
Are now resuming the June 17th, 2021 Frisco Planning Commission. Moving on to agenda item number 3, planning file number MAJ-21-0005, a review of the sketch plan step of the major site plan application for a proposed multifamily townhome project located at 315 South Third Avenue, Lot 21 through 24, Block 24, Frisco Town Site, applicant Plain House, representing Storm King Holdings LLC. I will turn it over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'm just gonna pull up plans. Okay. So on the meeting through the computer is the property owner, Amy Nakos, who will represent the project along with her architect, Abby Plain. Similar to the last project, you are looking at a sketch plan again, so there will be no vote. It's a chance to provide comments and feedback to the applicant and to hear what their proposal is. The applicant is proposing 5 townhome units. 2 of them are proposed to be 4 bedrooms and 3 of them are proposed to be 3 bedrooms. As you saw on the site plan, and I'll note on the screen here that each unit is proposed to have its own access in. So the project itself is located along Frisco Street, South Third, and then also the alley. So there will be 2 proposed accesses along with a dumpster access along the alley, 1 access along South Third Avenue, which is the side being called the front for setback purposes, and then 2 proposed accesses off of Frisco Street. The community plan was referenced in the staff report, including inclusive community and thriving economy parts. The property is zoned RH. As I said, South Third Avenue is proposed to be the front setback. Setback, lot coverage, and height are all being proposed to be in compliance with the town code with the sketch plan. We will check in further detail at the time of the full submittal for the major site plan. Lot coverage and building height are both proposed to be at the absolute maximum they're allowed right now, which is why we'll want to, staff will double check it again when it comes in for the final one. The access will require 2 waivers from Public Works. So we have suggested that the applicant start conversations with them. Those waivers will be using the alley and also the driveway separation. The driveway separation is only not in compliance with the street standards for the town between the dumpster and the 1 driveway. So all the rest of the driveways are all meeting the separation requirements through public work requirements. You'll see a traffic study submitted with the final stage of the major site plan on this project. We did want to discuss parking a little bit. So there is adequate parking provided for each unit if they are 1 unit each. Staff did raise a concern in the staff report about potential lockoffs on the lowest level. And so as you saw in the staff report, the way that the lower levels are designed, there's there's access from the patio, and then there is also a stairs for all of the units include doors. So basically the lower level of each unit is containing either a bedroom or a bunk rec room. They have some different names on each level or for the different units. And then also a bathroom, 1 or 2. And due
All
to
5 units.
correct, all 5 are meeting the definition of a lock-off at this point. The applicant can easily make some tweaks and take away that definite, not have them meet the definition. Or if they continue to meet the definition of a lock-off, then the lock-offs will not count as a unit of density, but they do have to have a parking not blocked by other bedrooms in the main part of the structure. So some of the units parking works even to have a potential lock-off, some of them don't. So that's something that will need to be worked out prior to the major site plan submittal. The other part of parking that was brought up, and this was kind of a change that happened more recently due to some lot coverage requirements, but the visitor parking space is shown at unit 3. This is not permitted to be blocking the garage space for unit 3. A visitor parking has to have its own access in and out and can't block another unit. The applicant's architect is aware of this and they have a solution already in their head, I believe, and they can address that a little bit for you during their presentation. The dumpster is shown, as I said, off of the alley. It is required now for this development because of 5 units do trigger the need for a dumpster. The final site plan submittal will need to show the enclosure and what it will look like, including the requirements that it has walls and a roof, and also that it's wildlife proof. Everything else in the code that was analyzed in the staff report is all in compliance. There's no bulk plane encroachments, and the residential development standards are all in compliance. A couple of things to note for you to potentially comment on tonight is the roof pitches encourage a 612 pitch, but it's not required. So the a minimum roof pitch of 612. The proposed roofs are flat roofs and pitched roofs with a 412 slope. So again, the code encourages, does not require a minimum pitch of 612, but staff is recommending the planning commission provide some feedback since they're providing 4 to 12 roof pitches. The building materials are in compliance with the town code, but we do ask that the staff, or sorry, the planning commission provide feedback on the proposed application of metal panels. Metal panels are permitted as long as they are used in combination with other acceptable materials. And then building colors, as you know, the pure white is not allowed to be used as a primary building color. Originally, the applicant had actually submitted for sketch plan with a more of a white color, and staff did recommend that they change that before they come before you. So what you're looking at tonight to comment on is a quarry gray color. So again, that is not white, and so it meets the code, but we did suggest that you provide feedback to the applicant on the proposed colors along with the materials and those roof pitches and any other feedback you had as you reviewed it. So.
Thank you, Katie. Andy, we'll start with you on questions.
Okay. Katie, I'm confused by your lock-off definition.
Okay.
Can we take a look at the lower?
Yeah,
level
sorry,
floor
let me
plan
pull that
again?
back up. Do you want a specific unit or?
Yeah, we'll take any units because I frankly don't see the lock-off part of them. When I look at these, I'm wondering what I'm missing.
So the way that staff looked at it was you could basically come in from the patio and then have access to this area. Or you could come in from the patio and go up the stairs to the other unit. So basically the bunk rec room, the bath area is a separated space from the rest of the dwelling unit.
But it doesn't have an entry.
And you can make that determination. We did look at it because you still are coming in from the patio and you have the door on the stairs and here.
That door's into the closet under the stairs, not to the stair that goes up to the rest of the unit, right?
This door appeared to come from the patio, right?
Right, but the stair, there's no door on the stair between the entry and the rest of the unit.
Oh,
Yeah, so the first.
Got it.
Person would have to use the same.
Yeah, they,
Yes.
I don't see how it's a lock-off.
no, if there is no door on that stair, then you're correct. And I will have the architect verify that.
They couldn't have a door at the bottom of that stair anyway. Would be against code.
Can you show the other unit you showed previously? Because that one I thought was clear.
I think it's the same thing. It's that, maybe that door to the closet that's been causing confusion on the stair.
Oh,
but
hold on.
There's, from what I can tell, there's no door between the entry and the rest of the unit.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, that makes sense. I misread that when I looked at it. It's a door to on the stairs. I didn't look close enough.
Okay, so we
So-
don't have a lock-off.
If long as there's no door on those stairs, then that's not a lock off by our definition.
That's
Thanks.
fine.
Okay, thank you. Yep, nope,
Donna?
that's great.
So my only question is on unit 3 on Third Avenue, the driveway is double width. Is that because it's on proposed now because it's on Third, or is that because of the current visitor parking spot, which can't really be there? Why is that one not tapered?
I'll let the applicant address that. Yeah, okay.
I wrote questions for staff.
I was looking back at the elevations. So where they have I think he says a 412 pitch. Those roofs are lower. So if they went to a 612, they wouldn't be in height violation.
Correct. It would be over height, most likely.
Just listening to you, I thought, well, they're already at max height, but I see those are all lower roofs. So I answered my own question. Thank you.
Robert, any questions for staff?
My only question is the visitor parking space again. I don't see visitor parking space on any other unit, so why did they need a visitor parking space on unit 3? And I don't see visitor parking on any of the other units.
So they don't need it for unit 3. They need one visitor parking space for the development site.
Okay, so this
So-
is for the this is a
Yes.
way to try and get through the development site.
Correct.
Okay.
They had proposed it in this corner and then we realized it put them over lot coverage when staff reviewed it.
Right.
So they then relocated over here and then we said, no, it can't go there. So,
I just couldn't figure
yeah,
out
no,
why.
great question. It can go anywhere on the site.
That's all.
Really don't have too many questions. I think so far I'm not seeing a whole lot of detail on landscaping other than, unless I'm seeing it wrong.
Correct. They did put in their table. Yep. You got it. And that's usually something that we analyze a lot more at the next step, but
Thank you.
Yeah. Katie, can we talk about the materials? I don't know why I'm having trouble understanding what they are with this material board.
I'll let the applicant, the architect do that, if that's okay. I did just put up that you had images shared through the website before the meeting. Just today, I received these images, so I wanted to put those up for you. They were just received today.
Those are new images?
These were just received today, correct? So this shows, and again, I'll let the applicant and the architect speak to what they submitted today, since staff hasn't had time to look at it.
But like concrete is not one of the materials, right?
It shouldn't be, no, not on what they had originally proposed.
Because that's kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, is this like an ethos or stucco?
I'll let the, let's have the applicant address the materials.
I have no questions for staff. Thank you, Katie. We will turn the floor over, we have both the architect, Abby, and the owner as well, who I believe is doing the presentation, Amy Nakos this evening. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you. Good to see you all. I'm going to give a brief introduction and then I'm going to have Abby answer all the hard questions. So I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Amy Nakos. I'm one of the owners of this land and this project. And I just wanted to share our intentions and our team so you could have a good understanding as we start this process, so you know who you're working with and what our goals are. My husband Darren and I were locals. We've lived here since 2003 and we've owned this building since 2005. We are committed to building something fresh, beautiful, timeless, and sustainable. And that's our goal. We care about Frisco and we love Frisco. So we brought together a really highly experienced team. We have Abby here. You all know Abby and her success in Frisco. We have hired Pete Campbell to be our builder with Campbell Construction. And because it's important for us to be forward thinking and to have a timeless but yet sustainable design, we hired Wendy Yates of Abigail Elise Designs. She's also in Frisco and she is guiding us with our exterior and interior specifications. So as a group, we're all passionate about Frisco and want to make this really awesome. Our site plan is based largely on Ridgeview Court next door. The layout is very similar with the 2 freestanding and then the triplex. That's where we came up with the layout. But one of the things that we're all doing is instead of just copying something that's been done before, we're reimagining everything and looking at every detail from scratch to say, how can we make this better? Is this really the way it should be? One of the ideas and one of the things that we've done so far is to create more storage space. And in fact, I even directed Abby to take some living space out of that lower level and create more garage storage space, because nothing makes me crazier than bikes, coolers, and kayaks in people's front lawn. So we want to give mountain residents the ability to store their stuff safely inside their units. Rooftop decks, kind of a relatively new thing in Frisco, but very highly desirable. Abby worked very, very carefully to design these rooftop decks to have separation and privacy so that everyone could enjoy that without being right next to their neighbor. And we're going to bring more and more of these new ideas and ways to improve it, and also working under the new Sustainable Energy Code. So talking about the exterior look, we drew some inspiration from newer complexes in Frisco, like the Pure Kitchen Collective Design Building, along with Abby's previous designs at 613, 615 Pitkin, and some of Pete's previous projects at 311 A and B Frisco Street, which is just 2 doors down from this. We're looking to bring in a neutral quarry gray color along with some darker accents to be pleasing to the eye, but also be timeless neutrals that as we move through time, they continue to be relevant. And those colors will pop with the wood accents we have and then the darker tones. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I look forward to working with all of you as we continue through this. And I'm going to hand it over to Abby to answer the hard questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy, and thank you guys. Thank you all for your time with this project and looking through it. Amy very well covered our design direction. I want to, kind of address some of those questions, architectural questions that popped up in the initial comments, and then I'm happy to answer any additional questions as we go through that, but if those pull up anymore. But I'm glad we figured out the lock off. Yeah, there's no doors going up to the upstairs. It's all just under stair, either coat closets or storage closets. So we'll obviously, I'll obviously go through and meet them, look through that again, just to make sure that we're not running into any issues there, but that is not our intent, and we're not intending to doing any lock-offs right now. The visitor parking, yes, that was kind of a last minute switch to try to accommodate the lot coverage requirement. That will obviously be looked at. We'll go back through and look through that and get that into an appropriate space. The unit, especially with the unit 3 and the tapered drive, the other drives were tapered to fit the separation requirement between driveways. The double loaded unit 3 is, I kept it that way because it fits within code, and it's obviously a nicer entrance to that unit if we have the space to do that. We're opening to tapering that if we need to, but right now, as I read it, if it's code and it helps with the access with unit 3. The dumpster obviously be shown covered, enclosed, and all the requirements there. The question that came up with the panels on the second rendering, we're really, with our whole team that Amy and Darren have assembled with this project, we're really trying to research new products and try to really think through these and what is the most pleasing and then also adaptable for future use as this building is, progressing through time. How can we make sure that we're staying up with the current trends if we need to reclad in the future? But what those panels are stuck, what we're initially intending were stucco panels, either a James Hardie panel or a some sort of rain screen stucco panel is what we're intending there, not concrete or anything that doesn't fall within the UDC guidelines. So I think that the waivers will be worked out per Katie, and then yeah, I'm happy to answer any other architectural questions that you guys may have.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to commissioner questions.
Abby, I know you talked about the materials here, but I'm still lost. Do you mind just walking me through what they are? Like in the images in the images.
Could you share, because I think you have a newer deck than the one that was given to us.
Thank you. That's one of the problems, I think.
Thanks.
I'm looking at one deck and
Yeah, I can share my screen, or if Katie, if you still have it.
So Abby, this is the one you emailed today.
Yep, and that was a progression in our conversations with Wendy Yates and trying to figure out this design concept. Amy and Darren very much wanted to keep with this all natural mountain aesthetic, trying to re-envision and try to push the envelope a little bit, while also keeping with precedent and trying to tie into the existing community that's already been built. So we're trying to keep balancing this nice, fresh aesthetic without being too light or white, but then also balancing that with some nice timber details, some steel, some black steel details, and trying to find a new aesthetic that pulls all of the wants and needs of the community together with.
So what are the materials that we're looking at here?
So the vertical would be a wood vertical rain screen, or a vertical thin wood siding.
So it's wood. Okay.
It's wood, and we what Wendy is proposing is to do something like a lighter stain or a white, or like a wash of some sort, but we're trying to keep that wood tone and that wood grain evident. That is the stucco panel I was referencing. We can either do stucco or some sort of rain screen. We're trying to figure out availability and access to materials in this COVID age. So that's what we're working through there. The top, that is a horizontal knotty pine or cedar siding. It's going to have different thicknesses as you go up, so it's a random assortment. And then that is steel panels, and then we've added a little bit of stone on the lower section. Yep, that's stone.
So you have wood going all the way to the ground?
Yes, over here.
And isn't that like a maintenance nightmare?
It can be. We're planning on bringing in some planters and getting that grade sloped away from that.
Those are my only questions.
Sure. Okay, so first one is the roofing materials. I guess I kind of gathered from the drawings, it looks like asphalt shingle. Is that right?
It's going to be a combination of a corrugated metal and a shingle.
Okay.
Similar tones, but trying to break up the texture.
And the previous deck talked about, at least on the materials piece that was submitted, there was a chip that said snowscape white. Has that gone away?
Yes.
Or is that there?
Yes. No, that's gone away.
And then you mentioned the sustainable energy code and that you're looking to pursue it. Are there any additional measures outside of, let's just say, wall and window construction that you're talking about employing out of the gate or making ready?
Yeah, so we're gonna, obviously keeping with the new code, we'll have the plugins in the garage. We'll have all that, and then we can also, the client and our team have talked about having it's solar ready for future builder or future owners if they want to tie in there. Trying to keep as much to the above and beyond the energy code as we can.
Okay, and then one more. So you mentioned the word rain screen facade multiple times.
Yeah.
I'm pretty familiar with that. Maybe not everybody is, but it's pretty cool that you're talking about doing this on a residential development here, because I haven't talked to anybody or seen anybody do it yet. Is there any issue or concern with like town approval on putting materials furthed out and, vacated airspace? Or if they're building inspectors or anybody else?
From a planning standpoint, I don't know of anything. Yeah, I don't know about the building code.
It's from my understanding that all the details, which then we'll go into here in the next round, those will all be code compliant. What I know what planning is concerned about is everything is within the setback and within the bulk plane, even with the furring taken into account with the rain screens. So on a planning end, those will all be within our setback and bulk plane requirements. On a code end, we'll address that with our details and make sure that those are complying.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Robert, questions?
You've talked twice about sustainability, but we're just going to make them solar ready, but we're not going to think about putting solar panels on here to help the whole idea of our sustainable development is to try and encourage the utilization of solar panels.
Yeah, absolutely. These are, this is a development that's going to be sold. So that is a selling point. I will definitely recommend to the, and Amy's on here and she can hear all this, but we'll look into cost and how that plays into how the project is budgeted. But yes, I totally understand where you're coming from there. It's, we're just trying to balance how can we have it accessible so they're not tearing apart the house to then put it on, but then also balancing what each individual buyer wants and needs.
And then just because I have to ask a question about accessibility, it just sort of becomes my, will any of these units be able to be made accessible should somebody want to, somebody come along to buy them? I'm assuming you're going to try and pre-sell these.
Yeah, obviously, per code, we're not required to make any A or B, units, but the way that they're structured and set up, between the garage and the house, there's very little threshold there, so that we could make some, be able to, access in, and then have the bedrooms and the bathroom on the lower level. Some of those bathrooms are large enough to technically qualify for an ADA standard. So yeah, I would say pretty easily that could be addressed.
And I've just got to ask this question: the brick that you're using, that you're showing, you wouldn't consider that white?
We were playing off of these renderings, but no, we're trying to hit a lighter tone, but we're trying to balance we're trying to balance a little bit of the gray end, but then a little bit of the warm end as well, to tie in with all the wood accent details. So it's hard with the stark white, especially with the environment that we're in, with this, when it's snowy most of the time, and then it just looks dirty. So we're trying to hit a tone that's not even close to Snow White, but is still on the lighter end. So it doesn't read dirty. It still looks clean, but not Snow White.
The architecture is very uplifting. I will say that. From my perspective, on the potential solar panels, I see a lot of roof deck and flat roof and cut up roofs. I don't really see all that much opportunity for the solar panels. But, that's up to, like you say, you'd sell the units and that would be up to the purchaser, what they want to do. So with all the roof decks and flat roof, what are you planning for them for snow removal? Are they going to just shovel it off onto the other roofs?
I believe I accounted for that in my site plan. Snow storage, yes, so that should be accounted for. And the placement of the snow storage, if you look on the either the landscape plan or the site plan, are to hopefully be easily accessible. So if you're on the roof, you can huck it over and it has a spot to land that's not on someone else's property.
So if one were on the roof deck, I assume it's a membrane roof under, and then you put like a wood deck on top of the membrane?
Yeah. Yep, and then all the gutters and downspouts are heated. So that helps with the ice buildup and helps with that any sort of snow buildup on the roofs if they're not shoveled.
Well, that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a couple questions. So the garages will have EV ports
Mhm.
code? Okay.
Yep.
And then on the roof decks, the height of, if you want to call it railings, walls, what's a height of those proposed?
They're all usually probably around 30 or 36 inches. They're all within the bulk plane and the height requirements.
No, but if you're sitting on your deck, how the height of the railings or
36
solid walls?
36 inches.
Okay, thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm lost track of who's controlling the screen, but can we look at one of the rendering that
Sorry,
was on the
that's
screen
me.
for a while, but a minute ago?
The,
One of the newer renderings with the materials mapped in there. Yeah, that one. Well, oh, sure, this one works. Abby, I'm curious, we know what all the materials are, but you've got these sort of dark gray bands and the posts and the rafter tails. Is that all steel, or what are we seeing with that dark gray color that's kind of all
Yeah,
over?
yeah, it would be a black steel or a cold rolled steel accent. All of the shed roofs over the decks and the entries, those are all proposed to be a steel with steel members. There's a little added detail. The Storm King name is from the Storm King lift at Copper, and so we kind of have some little details from there that we've tried to integrate into there, and that's one of them from the steel rafters over those decks. So that's what it is.
So none of that's timber. We're not seeing any exposed timbers. Everything that we see exposed are steel members.
Correct. We're proposing steel right now. The timber element we're trying to capture with the horizontal knotty, either cedar or pine, trying to get that rustic element in there.
That's one question.
Yeah.
So my question is only about the garages. They look different on the two different models. Are they the same rain screen material potentially as the siding?
Yeah, we kind of have two different elements that we're working with. We have either the current one we brought in is turning them into like an opaque glass material. When we switch to the stone, obviously we can't pull that across the garage doors. Where we don't have stone matching, we're still kind of going back and forth if we're going to continue that glass garage door, like say unit 3 over here to the left, or we're trying to keep that continuous wood surface so it kind of fades away.
That is my only question. So thank you, Abby, and thank you, Amy, for your wonderful presentations. We will close this portion unless anybody has additional questions and move on to public comment. If there is public comment at this time on this agenda item, please raise your hand. Katie, you have access to the
I do.
participants.
There's only one person on, I don't know who is, but they haven't raised their hand or unmuted. So.
It's Darren.
Oh, thank you. He's under DD, so it tricks me. Okay,
All
so
right.
there's no public on right now.
There's no public here, so we'll close the public comment portion and move on to commissioner comments and feedback. Keeping in mind that we are looking for feedback on roof pitches, materials, and proposed coloring. Andy, let's start with you again.
Awesome. Okay, so first of all, Amy, I want to compliment you. First off, we've seen a few of these townhome projects. None of them are copy clipped from one to the next. They're all very unique, and I appreciate that. You're not just coming in and trying to do the same building over and over again. This one is certainly unique. I think that from a material standpoint, I almost feel like it's too early to comment. We've seen 3 different sets of materials. I think you've got some opinions from the planning commission. So, we'll certainly be looking at that at the next round, but tough to comment. I do think some of the stuff we saw, at least in the original packet, was too light. You had a very white looking vertical siding and a very white looking stone. So looks like you're already working on that. I would say, it was brought up a little bit about all your wood siding going to the ground. You've got a lot of it. I would definitely encourage you to look at trying to add some sort of wainscot around there. The siding up here, just sloping away, is not going to do anything when there's 6 feet of snow piled up against the building. So really look at that, because it makes a building look bad real fast. As far as the other questions, the 412 pitches, they're all hipped roofs, so we never see a 412 gable. So in my mind, that's kind of what we're trying to protect against. We don't want to see the double wide 412 gable pitch, but when it's all hipped like that, I don't have a problem with it. And then visitor parking, obviously, we need to fix that. Did I hit every? I
Yep,
think
I
that
think
was
you
the
got it.
questions. Okay, yeah, overall, nice looking project. Can't wait to see the next round. Maybe a few more of the 3D renderings included in our initial packet would be helpful. But yeah, I think you're on a good track. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Donna?
I like the materials because they're contemporary, they're quality, and dramatic. I like having some of the contrast. In regards to the roof pitches, I'm concerned about potential solar, but in regards to the building itself, I think it makes it look a little bit, it keeps with the modern vibe of it. So I think it looks great, and look forward to next round.
Oh, she was gentle. Myra.
Yeah, I too like
She must
the,
like-
I like the individuality of the building. I think that the look is going to attract, this is probably not part of the conversation here, but I think it'll attract an excited buyer. And I think you'll do well with spending the money on all those materials. In terms of solar, again, that's going to come down to the buyers when they do it. So if you had some diagrams or aids so they could envision where and how much solar they could add, that wouldn't be much expense. That would just be a design need. I think that would help. And, being that I don't think there'll be that much solar, the higher efficiency above code you go, the better off everybody will be. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Robert, comments?
Yeah, Abby, and congratulations. I would agree with my other colleagues. I think it's fun to see your projects. They're very different from each other. And as I'm watching one of your projects being built straight across from my second floor unit, I really love the fact that you only had one driveway onto 3rd Avenue. I think we've talked about that in the past, where projects have too many driveways onto a more major street, although third isn't all that major. I love the fact that there's 3 buildings here and not one. I like the internal sidewalks. I'm fine with the 412, the roof line the way it is. I wish we'd start building buildings and put solar on them from day one. And it just frustrates the heck out of me that we're not doing that. I just think as a town, we're missing something. The only comment I would make is that the building feels too white to me. And I know it's not pure white, and I know the code says pure white. But it sort of feels like you're trying to skirt that just a hair. And so that would be my only comment. And I may be the only one who feels that way, but you know, part of our job is to give you our individual perspectives. Otherwise, I really like the project, and I think it'll be a great addition to Third Avenue, and be far better than the other building that you have there, Amy, which is looking more junky every time I go by it.
It's time.
Thank you, Robert. Patrick?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, I think most of it's been covered. You know, low slope roofs, the 412s don't bother me a bit. I'm not sure which one of those have shingles and which ones are metal. I mean, putting shingles on a 412 for me, I've just figured out here it doesn't work. So that's just my personal statement. Lightness and materials, again, you know, I don't know, but I would recommend that the next time, if you can give us physical samples, it goes a long way, because renderings are just tough. Everybody's screen's different, nobody gets it. And, you know, if it trends towards the color of granite or something, you know, so I know what you're trying to do, contrast and whatnot. I think there's a lot of range that you can hit that'll work, but I think physical samples will help people get a long way. So just maybe drop a board off at town hall. And then I just want to compliment you on a really fresh and kind of exciting design. I like it. I really do. I think it's cool. And I appreciate the quality and materiality that you guys are considering in the details. Thanks.
You know, I really like those windows, especially the ones that are on the corner. I think those are gonna be super cool from the inside. And I don't have an issue with the pitch of the roofs, those, or the materials really. I don't mean to sound like Debbie Downer, but I look at these buildings and I see another expensive place I can't afford. So, and you know, that happening to Frisco over and over and over. But other than that, no issues. I'm sure you're gonna work through all the details with Katie. Thank you, Minute. Any other comments?
I have one other comment.
Yeah.
Can you make sure that the next time that we get in our packet exactly what is on the screen above us? It was frustrating and confusing to me to see two very different color palettes.
I think this is a huge step up from the current occupant. You know, I feel a little nostalgia because I've looked at that building my whole life, but you know, it's time to, you know, bring some modern class to that corner. I think it's a big statement piece. My concerns are rooftop decks that are obviously great selling points, but are they good realities in our environment? Making sure that they do drain, and, you know, to say just throw it off a third story is, you know, is not a solution to me. And I think it happens over and over, and it's certainly a trend. And, you know, making sure that we don't cut corners there is important. The garage doors, I think that you could kind of delineate the space a little bit if you didn't use the exact same rain screen, I believe it's called, on the doors. You know, and again, back on the material boards, like I feel that it's a little light and lacking a little color, but you know, when you have, you know, trees and vegetation, it doesn't feel as stark as it does on a piece of paper. But I'm very excited about this. Abby, I would like to commend you on your creativity too, and not just rubber stamping this community. And Amy, I know you have impeccable style, so you guys are gonna bring a great product to this town. And we look forward to seeing the next steps, maybe something, you know, with, you know, what is that, the shadows.
Shadow studies.
Shadow studies. just to kind of see the overall scale, because, I'm surprised nobody had commented on how big it is. But, I think you've done a good job utilizing that site. And so we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you both for your time this evening. And if there's anything else, we will close this.
Thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Staff updates for us. Don, what you got?
I can
Something's happening tomorrow.
for a few, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, the between 2nd and 5th will be closed off of Main Street for setting up of the promenade, and that will be in effect for probably a couple of months. No end date has been finalized, but we'll be working on that, and it's going to look, there's going to be a lot of aesthetic improvements from last year with a lot more flower pots and more rain barrels and lights, and so it's going to be and none of those lovely metal fences. So
I also heard shading.
yes, there's going to be some shade sails as well over some of the parklets. So there's going to be a combination of parklets and street spaces and a whole bunch of things.
Are we gonna ask CDOT to shut down so that we don't have the double problem?
Mount Royal Plaza parking lot. Yes, exactly. So we're
I can't wait to see how we're handling traffic. I'm sure that there's a plan.
There
I'm
is a plan on
fascinated
Public
to see
Works
it.
that's been working with CDOT as well as and coming up with a good plan on how to message traffic. VMS boards have been going up around town to direct truck routes. Unfortunately to Granite, but Granite is going to take a good brunt of it, but
But you can't turn on the Granite anymore. So water dams.
that's
water
correct. So
tower,
you
and
can
anything
turn,
that
yeah,
can
you
burn.
will be, the truck route will be, if you're coming off of exit 201, down Main Street to Madison, to Granite, so 7th and Water Tower. And that temporary roundabout is going to be established at the 8th Avenue intersection with Highway 9, somewhere July 1st or so. That certainly will help traffic. So it's moving along. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be a little bit nuts. What about, well,
They move the sign every day, so the road's widening every day. Because people just go around it. I live at the corner there.
yes.
So it does turn into a super, I don't know, the sign doesn't work and it just creates congestion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if the county and the HOA would stop grading the road, that
That's
problem.
what I was.
That problem
Make
will
some
help
potholes.
solve it.
I feel like that's been your plan for years.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a challenge certainly because it is a public road, so it's hard to close a public road for to not, so it's not used by the public.
Stop grading them?
Uh,
Urge him?
You
Should
could
I
talk
call him?
to Robert Jacobs and see what he'll do.
At
for you.
night, I start looking at the road.
So no, certainly we anytime there's a construction project or an event or whatever else, we realize that there's impacts on neighborhood streets and other neighborhoods, and we do everything we can to minimize those and
People
lessen
just
those
go
and address those.
so fast, and that's such a connector for trails and dogs and people, and because it's dirt and it's.
I'm on Granite because Granite is, I mean, I watch people speed on Granite in ways that are.
We are getting some artificial traffic calming devices known as speed humps that will be deployed out on Granite Street for sure. Obviously, it's not our preferred solution. Speed humps are never this great thing. We'd prefer to do, no, they are temporary speed humps. You've seen them around where they're just, it's a device that Public Works will affix to the road and then remove when we're done.
I would suggest you park a police car with a mannequin.
There certainly will be some enforcement, and I think certainly as people become more understanding of the enforcement, it's going to be it'll be better. We will see also that it's frankly a lot of times it's the people that live here that will be the biggest offenders
Yeah.
of the speeds, and
People don't know about
we've
Bill's
always
Ranch
seen that.
unless they live here.
Yeah. So it is something that we're aware of and we'll work through as a community, and as we become aware of problems, we'll address them as best we can and keep on moving forward.
Any new update on this, the lot at 9th and Summit Boulevard, or I mean Summit Boulevard in Granite, the south?
No, there's no update. There's no change to the status of that particular property. Fox Meadows.
Are we worried about existing grade being altered?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's actually applied for a grading permit. I'm not sure the status of that.
But that will he effectively be changing existing grade for future development?
No.
Because now his height limit is measured from previous grades, right? Not new.
Isn't it transferring as well?
I don't know.
But it does go from original grade, not from,
Correct.
from,
That is correct.
okay.
Although I would argue that if somebody else changed their grade, like CDOT.
The former Rainbow
it's different.
They're in for that, so we'll be reviewing those and go from there.
Because having the promenade and both of those properties being developed at the same time is going to be.
Sure.
Which one's that, Donna?
Rainbow Court.
Oh, yeah.
I was just asking, because they dug out the foundation that they had already poured, and now nothing was going on, so I was just sort of
They
curious
have
about.
submitted a building permit, so we'll review that and we'll see it goes. A couple of, that's for the Rainbow Court, former Rainbow Court Winter Plaza.
It's gonna
We
be a
lost a
swimming
tooth
pool.
in our sawtooths.
Yes.
Be a swimming pool.
A couple of other things. So that's the promenade. If you have any, but it'll be pretty cool this summer. We have received a number 8 proposals for our complete streets RFP that we had issued, which is going to be complete streets plan for Granite, Galena, and the numbered avenues between Madison and Highway 9. So we'll be reviewing those and hopefully awarding that contract soon. So the next time a developer comes to you in that area and say, how do you want me to tie in? We'll actually have a plan and an answer and a responsibility for that. And hopefully that'll be issued and awarded in July, and then that design process will go through for the next 6 months or so. We are doing an update to council of the implementation of the Trails Master Plan. You may remember that was adopted in 2017. That'll be on the June 22nd council agenda. We're just giving a presentation on all the trail work that's been done over the past several years, as well as some staff recommendations and requests for feedback. Bring to them next for budgeting purposes for the coming years. So if you're interested, go ahead and tune in on the 22nd. And then finally, housing. We're doing a lot and talking about housing and doing everything we can to address housing as fast as we can. We had a good work session with council on the 8th, I want to say, so June 8th or so. Again, all of our meetings are now on YouTube. You are now on YouTube forever. Congratulations. Advantage is you can go back and watch those meetings anytime you want.
What's the update on the CDOT project that we?
Granite, that is going to council for, so as planning commission, you gave feedback, but so the council as the project owner will hear feedback and again, just get an update on that on the July 13th agenda as well.
And where are we at with, are we still working with Summit County on capacity for Lake Hill?
Summit County is continuing to work on their impact study. That's a requirement for their zoning. They're going to do a PUD zoning of that property. So they have got most of the feedback on that. They're working on the draft report, on finalizing the draft report on that. I believe the county commissioners and town council are looking to do a joint meeting at the end of July.
They need capacity from us for water and.
They would like to request water service from the town of Frisco. That certainly is a request that the county would have to make. Sewer sanitation district. So it's a separate entity, I guess. Generally, but there's pumps and you can engineer anything, so. So
Nobody drinks that water.
just the purpose of this study is to say without a doubt which the best water and sewer solutions are. I think we all knew that the result is going to be Frisco Sanitation District, but they did have to go through that exercise.
Seems like that's taken a long time.
I won't comment necessarily on that, but certainly things sometimes take longer. And frankly, last year caused a lot of things to maybe change in their time slots.
But for our crisis situation, which is what everybody has declared workforce housing in this place.
Sure.
The fact that we're how many years beyond the initial look at like
Well, you know what? When I started working at the county in 2014, I started working on the Lake Hill project and finalizing the transaction to purchase that from Forest Service. After the act of Congress, they got it started. So yeah, I'm aware certainly of the timeline. But 15 years before that is when the town and the county first started talking to the Forest Service about acquiring that property. So again, it's been a 20-year project just to get to this point.
Well, and I know when I was on county planning, all of that came in front of us. And so about, you know, a mix of this kind of building and that kind of building in phase 1 and phase 2. So
Planning happened for a number of years and haven't seen Lake Hill except in some conversations.
Except for the updates I gave you every now and then. So yeah, they are moving forward and we should see some movement on that. Sorry.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. It's hot in here.
For sale or for?
I think it's gonna be